I will call this meeting to order. I'm Charlie Gadzik, Chair of the Planning Commission. This is the January 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Newcastle Planning Commission. Would you join me in a flag salute? Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Marsh.
Here.
Commissioner Troutman.
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Commissioner Gack.
Here.
Commissioner Lowe.
Here.
Commissioner Van Natta.
Here.
And Commissioner Blocker.
Here.
And lastly, Chair Gadzik.
Here.
Awesome. All here.
First order of business is to approve the agenda. And let me say a few words about it before I give you the opportunity to amend it if you wish to. And that is in the public hearing portion of our meeting, after we have taken public testimony, and this is not the public comment that is going to happen in a few minutes, but the public hearing later in the meeting, that will be your opportunity, you commissioners' opportunity to point out things in the plan that you think should be changed or you'd like at least to have discussed before we make a recommendation to the council. So I just want you to be aware that that is going to be part of the agenda, and that's when it'll happen. Yep. It's actually part of the hearing, but it happens after the public testimony. Okay? So with that, does anybody have any, would anyone like to make any changes to the agenda? Okay, agenda is accepted as written. Next is approval of minutes. We have the minutes first of September 12th. You had a chance to review them. Does anybody have any changes or corrections? Okay, any objections to the minutes as written? And we'll note they're approved. Next is the minutes of the October 23rd meeting. Anybody have any changes to those minutes? Okay, we'll note them as being approved. We now have the public comment period, and it's unusual that we have a public comment period and then a public hearing. So let me explain the difference, which may mean not much of a difference for those of you who want to make a public comment. Typically, the public comment at this point in the hearing is to comment on anything that you think the Planning Commission ought to hear. The public hearing is meant to be the place where comments about the comprehensive plan, which we might act on tonight, that's the time for that. However, if you are here to make an opinion known about the comprehensive plan and you don't want to stay or you can't stay, the commission is going to hear your comment regardless of when you make it. One difference is that we will not be responding to the public comments after you make them, but in the public hearing portion, there will be a part in the agenda where commissioners, if there were questions raised or if they want to respond, they will do so at that time on the comprehensive plan. So that distinction might mean something to you, and maybe you'll want to stick around if that's important to you. So with that, I will now open the public comment period. Thank you for bringing that up. Normally, we are very loose with our time limits, but tonight, because we have several people, we will honor the 3-minute time limit.
More than enough.
Okay.
More than enough.
Yes.
So my comment is...
And your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Joe Hughes. Lived in Newcastle for about 28 years. Same house right down the street. We're excited about the possibility of building an additional dwelling unit on our property. Working with Tyler, I've learned most of the ins and outs of what it's going to take. In doing some preliminary planning and a site survey, it's become evident, though, that the existing 20-foot setback rule off the back property line, whereas on the side property line it's a 5-foot setback, is really restrictive in that it puts the ADU unit essentially in our back living room. And we're hoping that during the process and the coming planning for the city and the comprehensive plan, and as we adopt the new state ADU codes, that hopefully the 20-foot setback can be looked at as being a flexible setback requirement, and that we will have more flexibility in building an ADU unit on our property that fits the property and fits the intent of hopefully the density expansion that Newcastle is looking to achieve by adopting these ADUs into its planning code. So that's essentially, I just want that, I guess this is the start of that process to get you thinking and see where we can go with this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Would anyone else like to make a comment at this point? Okay, we'll close the public comment period then and move to commissioner comments. And I would like to begin commissioner comments because I would like to welcome our newest commissioner, Lynn Troutman. And I want to say that of all the time I've been on the commission and sat through interviews of commissioners, we have never had a new commissioner who has come as well prepared and as knowledgeable about the work of the Planning Commission as we have with Lynn. So it's a real pleasure for me to welcome you, Lynn, to the commission. Okay, I'll open the floor to any other commissioners who wish to make a comment. Just raise your hand. And Commissioner Blocker.
I would like to nominate Lynn Troutman to be the vice chair.
Okay, well, we'll have that as an order of business later in the agenda, so if you will
Okay.
hold on to that.
That's where I'll be.
Okay. Commissioner Troutman.
Thank you, Chair Gadzik. Thanks so much, Stu. Thank you for your welcome. I really appreciate it. It's good to be here. This is a great seat. My old seat is right where Mr. Campton is sitting right now. And this one is immeasurably better. So I appreciate that. It also happens to be Jim Quigg's old seat. Jim Quigg, wow. I'm never going to be as beloved as he is, but we both have a common mission of trying to get the people involved, listen to what they have to say, and then bring those concerns to whichever public entity is responsible for responding to the citizens. And I intend to live up to Jim's mission of doing that. Like I said, I'm glad to be here. If I've learned anything in my past lives, it's the best way that I can be effective is to surround myself with smart people. Hit the jackpot here. I've got that in abundance. So, you know, with your help, I'd hope that I can make a significant impact and help the people of Newcastle out. That's why I'm here. Did I mention I'm glad that I'm here? I'm glad that I'm here. And I look forward to working with all of you and with as many people as are interested. I've got all day and all night to talk to anybody who wants to speak with me. So thank you, everybody. Let's roll.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Cack.
So Happy New Year, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Amy George and the CAC team for organizing yet another successful Lights of Newcastle. I also participated in that event. It was fun. There were about 18 fellow residents who basically went all out with their creative lighting in the yard and in the windows. So it was wonderful to be a part of that. So well done. Thank you, CAC. That's all.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yes. I want to make a comment. So first, also welcome Lynn, and I will say it's an honor to serve with you, and I'm very impressed with your commitment to joining our meeting all the time, and that's I second what Chair Gaza said. You probably are the most prepared incoming commissioner. I do want to make a comment. I'm referring to the email Aaron sent it to us regarding the requirement, the county requirement. And I think it basically those, the King County also Puget Sound Regional policy guidance is more recommendation, alignment, not mandate, not requirement. And I think on the note I said if those not required, then let's remove it. And I think Aaron said basically we'll need a commission agreement. So I just want to bring this up.
So when we get to the part later in the meeting, if there are specific things that you think we should discuss removing, that'll be the time to bring it up. Okay.
I'd like to also welcome Len. It's only fair that you're here since you were instrumental in getting me here. But more so, I appreciate the fact that you have tracked city business, been part of knowing what's going on in the city for years at both the council meeting and the planning commission. So I am very thankful that you're now at the dais up here and you will be contributing to what's going on. I'd also like to thank the public for coming tonight. Thank you for that. It's nice to have our neighbors be here with us and to take an interest in our city. So thank you for that. And hopefully there's some people watching online or will see this, and we welcome you and glad you're here too. And Charlie, I apologize for jumping the gun, but because I had volunteered to be considered for vice chair way back when, before there was a vacancy that now is filled by Len, I was willing to consider being the vice chair. And you asked me about that as I came in the room tonight. I just wanted to turn that around before it got started.
No worries. Okay, we'll move to reports. The chair does not have a report, so Director Fitzgibbons.
I was going to do a toast, but I realize people who are sitting with us tonight maybe don't have a beverage in their hand. But this has been a very long process. The comprehensive plan has been a learning process for all of us. And throughout the process, I am now the third director, different staff working on it. And the Planning Commission has been the rock. Not only do they rock, but they are the rock. And they have put so many hours into this. This is not their day job. They've just volunteered to do this. And so I just wanted to let you guys know how lucky I feel, we all feel as staff, to work with you, to have you as our commission. You really are, we are so lucky. And I just wanted everyone to give you a round of applause for all of your hard work. So thank you. It has been a lot, I know. And then I have some serious business. I wanted to let you know, and this will speak more to what we're going to start working on middle housing at next month's meeting with the affordable housing piece of it with Arch. And staff learned on the 7th that the Department of Commerce has made a decision, a sort of an interpretation on the way that House Bill 1337, which is the ADUs, and 2321 and 1110 work together. And this was new information to me, but the city will be required to allow 2 ADUs per single family home. So if there's a single family home, that will be 3 units on a lot, regardless of what tier we're in for middle housing. So it's only 2 units of middle housing, or a single family home and 2 ADUs. And that's because ADUs are not considered middle housing. So it's the final ruling from the state, and just so you know, that's what we're looking at, planning for. Anyway, and other than that, I think that's it. Thank you again.
Okay, our first order of general business is to continue the conversation on our connected streets policy and to recap it. And Aaron, please jump in if I miss anything important. We spent a good deal of time at our last meeting discussing the policies in the comprehensive plan that have to do with connected streets. And those policies in that draft of the plan were changed somewhat from what the original plan was, or the plan that we're going to be superseding. But we wanted to take those changes further, and we found in the course of our conversation that the commissioners wanted to go even further than the language that we were talking about at that meeting. So and one of the things that the commissioners were very interested in was in giving the residents of the neighborhood much more say, not just a voice to be heard, but maybe even the decision-making authority about whether or not a street would be connected between two existing subdivisions. And we asked staff to consider that, to get a legal opinion about what the city's legal obligation is to landowners and developers, so that we wouldn't create a law that would be, in essence, against the law or open the city to liabilities that would be unwise to expose ourselves to. Erin got some opinions on that, and then based on that, we've developed, she and I together developed an alternative proposal, which we will talk about tonight. But before I go to that, maybe Director Fitzgibbons, if you would say something about what the legal guardrails were that you learned.
Yeah, so one of the desires was to have the community take a larger role in the decision-making process about through streets in their neighborhoods. And we can't do that because a developer has the right to know what they are and aren't allowed to do with their property. A developer meaning the property owner or a company coming in and doing a development. And that would have been considered arbitrary and capricious. And so is the legal term for it. And so I worked with the city attorney and Charlie, as he mentioned, to really kind of define something that we were looking for, which was not to interrupt a community who is well established by having a bunch of traffic go through their neighborhood. If there was the possibility, if there was the possibility of it being used as like a pass-through to like the freeway, for example. We still do have to have public connections from properties. That's a state requirement. You still have to be able to get emergency responders to a location, and we still have to uphold the requirements of the state. So hopefully this new proposed policy gets to the crux of the change.
So we'll talk a little bit more about the proposal, and then we'll open it up to commissioners for discussion. The policy we're proposing would replace 3 of the policies that are in the existing, well, I shouldn't say the existing draft. The existing draft is new, but the previous draft that we were considering, those policies that would go away are policy 41, 42, and 43, all of them which started with the words that basically the city shall encourage the expansion of the street system to basically connect streets. So those would go away. The policy that would replace those would say that to the maximum extent allowed by law, the city should not create through streets between existing recorded subdivisions that could potentially create cut-through traffic unless It's required for emergency service responses and no other option is available. And community outreach is performed and considered ahead of approving the first application, and any traffic calming measures are considered with the community's input. Or the through street has been previously determined to exist or to be allowed by another action. And we might have to go back to you, Aaron, to expand on that. There was an existing strategy in the plan which would be retained, and that is that new residential streets should be designed to discourage regional cut-through traffic by using traffic calming and other techniques while maintaining the connectivity of the transportation system. But there is a proposed strategy that would be added to that existing strategy. And in the comprehensive plan, there are about 15, 16 really broad goals. There are a few hundred policies, and then there are strategies beneath the policies that are meant to be more granular implementation instructions. And so another strategy would be that the city shall study the proposed locations for connected through streets. And these are shown on a map in the comprehensive plan called the Functional Street Classification Map, to identify which are most likely to be candidates for connection. And the intent behind that one is that the people who live on those streets are not surprised that, now before anything happens, they know that that is a candidate for one reason or another. Okay, so with that, commissioners, raise your hand and we'll call on you to talk about it. Commissioner Van Atta.
Actually, I got just a process question, I guess. So today, somebody wants to develop their parcel, and the big white sign gets posted, proposed land use action, and call Tyler at the city for questions. At what point in the process does that sign go up? Is that before the application's approved, or how does that work?
So it's a good question. So when an application first comes in and we determine that it has enough documents to basically be worth everyone's time to look at, it is it's routed to all of the various people that will review it: land use, engineering, fire, etc.
Yeah.
And they sit with it for 28 days and make their first round of technical comments. And we also, at that time, are looking to make sure that they have every subplan that they need, essentially. So, like, sure, they may have a site plan, but do you have a plan showing your drainage, your erosion? Do you have a plat map for a subdivision?
Okay.
And once we have decided that every piece of it is there, even though we're not ready to approve it yet, we've just decided that the application is complete. It is officially called complete at the end of that 28-day period, and that is when the notice of application goes out. So after we send the applicant an email that says you're complete, and then they get 2 weeks to post that signboard up there. And at roughly the same day, they get letters go out to homeowners, and it's posted up on the city website, and the notice of application also gets posted in the Seattle Times. And that triggers the 30-day comment period. And so that happens pretty early because there's still, at that point, multiple rounds of technical comments, so revision that are going to happen after, I guess, during and after the comment gathering period. So it starts fairly early in the process. A permit could never get approved while that comment period was ongoing, but that's usually moot because it usually takes far longer to be ready to approve anyway.
Got it. Thank you, that was very helpful. So when you get to, on the proposed policy, B.
Wait, before you proceed,
Yeah.
I think you were asking a different question than Tyler answered.
No, that was the question.
Because then let me ask. There is at least one street in Newcastle that I've come across where there is a big, not an application sign, but a big sign that says site of a future through street. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I was talking about the big white sign, like
Okay.
proposed land use. I have seen those at some dead-end streets, the sign you're talking about, but yeah,
Okay, good.
that's not what I was talking about. So when you get to the proposed policy, number B, community outreach is performed. It sounds like that already happens today in the process, right? So what's different about this?
So the city already, we do what is required. There's a required process for outreach where we notice, we take in comments. You know, those comments only have a certain amount of, once an application comes in, they're what's called vested to the code, right? And so, we're looking at the code as it is, and we're looking at their application. And so those comments come in and we document them, we answer them to our best of our ability, and we ask the developer to answer as best to their ability. This takes it a step beyond what's required. This takes it to the level of have an outreach meeting. If there's concerns, talk about, see here, a traffic calming measures, are there things that we can condition? Because you can create what's called a condition on the approval, but they have to be commensurate with the work. Like, we can't just say, go redesign your project if it's code compliant.
Yeah.
If there's something omitted, then that opens it back up. But, in the cases that we've had so far, they've been code compliant projects.
Okay.
So
okay.
it just puts an extra level of outreach on the project.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Troutman.
Thank you, Chair Gadzik. This is a question for either maybe Tyler or Director Fitzgibbons. The last part of the proposed policy says the through street unless the through street has been previously determined to exist or allowed by another action. Can you explain to me what other action would, what constitutes another action? Why would that be allowed? Under what circumstances?
Yeah, what might preempt that? So for example, around the city where you see locations where it says a through street will be put here, that means through another land use action, they determine that at some point that would be a through street. Or on a plat map, you would see a temporary turnaround, and then the temporary turnaround is here until such time that there's always language that this street turns north-south. Or it could be through a development agreement, right? So if you have a development agreement and then you have a plat, because there's several land use applications required, and there's something in that development agreement, you've done all the outreach and everything already, and you've determined this, then that action allows it, right? So you don't have to do it, that same level of outreach again in the next process in the step. So it just says, you have to do this for projects, but we're not going to make you do this every step of the way. Because then that adds red tape and that adds dollars and potential damages. So when you get into maximum extent allowed by the law, that's what we're trying to avoid.
So if I could follow up, all of these conditions are well documented then, so there shouldn't be any gotchas or surprises. They've been previously documented and available for the public to be aware of, and like you say, there's no, oh my goodness, nobody told us type of a situation.
That's the hope, at least to limit that.
Okay, thank you, Director Fitzgibbons.
Commissioner Blocker.
I'm trying to understand in the number of residents that we've had in the meetings recently on the 85th, I think it is. What in this process that we're considering here would have prevented them being caught unawares and having that happen to them as it apparently has? And then the second part of that question is, there's been some discussion that I've heard amongst them that perhaps there was a variance issued or something because of grade associated between whether their houses are and the new development coming in from below. So at what point too then would a variance get issued in the course of a process like this? So two parts, when would they know, and then when would that kind of thing happen?
Right, so, so on that project, we did the outreach, the developer wrote a response letter, Tyler did responses as well, and he worked with the director at the time on the responses. So it's not that the city was, I would not say the city was unresponsive, but what it would do is have a, maybe we go out and we have a community meeting and we talk about it, and we explain better what we can and can't change based on, it. Because to be honest, a developer can come in and say, I want a through street. In our current code, a developer can come in and say, I want a through street, or they can come in and say, I want a cul-de-sac. And that's their design decision. And they're both legal, as long as they meet the road width requirements and the bulb diameter and whatnot. The variance, I think, was a public works. Okay, deviation for the grade, or what was it for? Do you remember? It was a public works deviation, and those are different than like a variation from dimensional development codes in the zoning. Those have their own process, so that would have been captured by the time of the hearing, because we would have have that for the hearing examiner to review.
May I continue? I know that it's not legal to landlock a person's property.
Correct.
So streets have to be able to be extended, not necessarily connected through, but extended, obviously, for access to land.
Correct.
But I don't understand why they would be required to be connected, because certainly, because we have A here, which is in the case of emergency services, well, certainly emergency services can go down a dead-end road and be provided. So I'm still trying to work through the connectivity issue, and in my mind, I haven't really understood it well.
Oh, so I suppose in this, had we had this policy, for example, so there was a plat, there was a message on the plat of Winfield Ridge that was a temporary turnaround. If we're gonna get like real into the details here, there was a temporary turnaround for north-south connection. Perhaps we could have held it to the north-south connection and said, no, you can't connect this all the way through, because it says north-south. It was a different director, and I'm just pie in the sky right now. But perhaps we could have said that. Or, according to this code, again, if it's required for emergency response services and no other option is available. So the city could have pointed to this policy and said, well, look, we have this policy. Why do you need this through street, right? Is there no other option available? We would have known the preference of the community, and the plan was not to have connected streets. The way our current plan reads, it looks like we want connected streets. So kind of just it changes the guidance from connect them through to wait, be careful. And that's technical language.
Question. Just for my clarification, traffic calming measures, what are those? What would those be? I guess I should know that, but I don't.
Oh, no. That's a good question. And Tyler, if you want to answer any, just tell me to be quiet. But I would say a traffic calming measure is like a traffic circle or a speed bump, or there's curb bulbs. Just anything. If you go through the reserve, there are a lot of traffic calming measures up there. Like you have to like weave through, and yeah. So and it just makes people go slower. So on this particular project, the road is narrower, and there's going to be a speed hump. That's where we are right now.
think it may also be worth, on traffic calming, it may also be worth noting that, so you take the just north of the project we've been discussing here, you have the Heemstra development in the intersection of 116th and 84th now has that mini roundabout in it. And that mini roundabout came as sort of a late negotiation between the developer and the city. And it worked out well that time, but the city, frankly, probably could have stood to have more leverage in that negotiation. And we're getting something like this where we'd have a policy that would encourage traffic calming up front, as opposed to something that we try to retrofit in later, is, I think, going to give us a greater chance of success and just set us up in more of a direction that actually gets us to these things being implemented. And I think that's going to be a part of maybe a larger pivot, not just with this comp plan, but with the public works standards update and some other things.
Thank you.
Commissioner Blocker.
So at what point, if we go with this language, at what point would citizens on an existing street like the one we've talked about so much, at what point would they actually be put on notice that something was coming, and how much actual potential input would they be given to potentially prevent what's happened in that particular situation?
It would happen at the notice of application. It would happen in the beginning of the project.
And how would they get that?
It would come through the notice of application mailer itself. In fact, we're already working on this with a project that came in. And so we're already looking for a space to have a meeting, and the developer's working with us. We're looking to have a space where we can have a meeting with the community in the beginning. Because the other thing too is, of course, you don't want to get too far into design and then have something come up that's expensive for the developer.
That's where we are now.
Yeah. So, yeah, you do. You want to catch that early in the beginning. And we also are changing and working with the city manager to change what's on the NOA. There notice of application, there's required language, but also like an explainer of, well, what can you actually change? Because, again, it's all code-based at this point, once you're in it.
Commissioner Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Gadzik. So when it comes time to codify this in changes to the ordinance, presumably, the phrase that could potentially create cut-through traffic, does the city have the ability to ascertain in a meaningful way? I mean, people could speculate and say, oh my God, there's a street going through here and there's going to be all kinds of cut-through traffic. There's a reality where if you have a street where there hasn't previously been a street, there's probably going to be more traffic there. But I guess when there's a discussion about, the street could potentially create cut-through traffic, once it comes time to put that in an ordinance, is the city going to be able, is staff going to be able to write an ordinance that is measurable or has some sort of concrete parameters around that concept?
Good question. I would be relying on there's a traffic impact analysis that's required. And that is what we would be relying on. It may be working with Public Works. We can, and again, this is without having Director Bronze here. I don't know for sure, but maybe we can come up with parameters that all staff can understand and review, and that are easier to explain. what their actual impact would be and look like.
Are there any other questions about this? So we could proceed in one of two ways. If there's general agreement that this is acceptable, we can just say there's a consensus to approve this change. We could also have a formal motion if someone would like to have this be passed by motion. And if someone would like a motion, then I would need someone to make a motion.
I would propose that in the next iteration of the comp plan, which hopefully would be sent forward to the city council, that the changes contemplated here on agenda item 9.1 would be made. So it would be the replacement of existing policies, P41, 42, and 43 with the proposed policy, and I believe the addition of the new proposed strategy.
Would someone like to second?
I'd like to second it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
So we have 4 yeses. Let's do a roll call vote here so we are clear about it. Let's start with Commissioner Blocker.
No.
Commissioner Van Anna?
Yes, to approve the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lowe?
No.
Commissioner Keck?
No.
Commissioner Troutman?
No.
Commissioner Marsh?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, so the motion fails. So that leaves us with, without a clear direction on policy with connected streets to include in the recommendation to the city council.
Doesn't that leave us with the current language absent a change?
It does, yes, but I don't think that's what the direction that the commission is in favor of.
That's kind of my point.
Yeah, Commissioner Troutman?
There may well be developments later in the meeting that potentially could address this.
Okay. Commissioner Blocker?
I think it's worthy of a little more discussion. And quite frankly, when I received the email that said the city attorney said the language that I had suggested earlier was arbitrary and capricious, I looked up the definitions of the words and I said, well, I certainly don't understand why, but is it perhaps if we could have more discussion on this in this meeting or a future meeting, we could have actually a little more explanation of why that stronger language, I certainly confess, was considered.
Director Fitzgibbons?
So we can't have the community be the deciding body. The deciding body needs to be those that are, well, I'm not going to say qualified. Qualified is not the right word, but those that are representatives of the city as outlined in the municipal code. And remember, this is a policy. This is not ordinance. So this is an intent and this is guiding language. And this is what informs our ordinances and resolutions. So as a policy, this is what you're voting on. Does this, what is it about this? This is what staff need to know, and those who are voting yes, we need to know what is it not capturing? Because we cannot have the community be the deciding body on this.
Commissioner Blocker?
Thank you. Perhaps because we got the hearing in front of us, I guess what I'm suggesting is, can we bring it up at a later meeting still and discuss it further?
We can bring it up later in this meeting.
Okay.
after the public hearing.
Yep,
Or
okay.
or I should say, after the public testimony, which is part of the public hearing.
Right.
And see if a path emerges at that point. Okay? All right. We will move on then. To the election of a vice chair. The floor is open for nominations for someone to be vice chair. Commissioner Blocker.
Thank you, Chair Gadget. I would like to nominate Lynn Troutman as the vice chair.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye. Or I guess we should say, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, welcome, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'll have to sit here next time. The-
This is gonna be easy.
The most rapid rise in Planning Commission history. Okay, the next is the work plan. Director Fitzgibbons?
So we discussed the work plan back in, I wrote it down, thank goodness. When did we talk about this? October. And we have had the opportunity to speak a number of times with city council in the last 6 to 9 months. So the proposal is to take the work plan for their consent agenda rather than having a joint meeting, particularly because our work plan is really on state mandated ordinances and upgrades to our codes. And so with the exception of small cells, lying here at the end of the year, and the public works standards, which are kind of required because we need them for the middle housing requirements. Everything else on here has a state mandated deadline. So the question from staff is, is the commission comfortable with this just going on consent agenda rather than having a joint meeting this year?
Commissioners, anybody who wishes to express opinion? Go ahead.
I just have one question for clarification. What is the step housing discussion?
So that is the emergency housing requirement.
Well, I mean, I think it makes good sense since it's all sort of on a timeline anyhow, just to do the consent agenda.
Commissioner Marsh?
I agree with Commissioner Van Atta that the time could be spent addressing the substance of these things rather than taking the time to do a meeting for something that's preordained.
Okay, sounds like we have no objections, so that's the way we'll proceed. Okay, we're about to move to the public hearing, and I noticed that I'm missing something that the second sign-up sheet, I've got one page here and there's a page.
That was for the general comments.
Oh, okay.
I'll get through that. This is the public hearing.
All right, thank you. Okay, it is now time for item 10.1, receive comments on the 2044 comprehensive plan. This is a public hearing. And we will begin it with a short overview from Director Fitzgibbons. After that overview, she will be available for questions or comments from the commission, and then we will move to public testimony. We have a number of people who have signed up. If you haven't signed up and would like to speak, you can do that. I see Peggy. I'll just add your name, Peggy. Okay. And I don't see any other, oh, okay, I'm gonna bring the sheet back out and let you sign it, sir. So if it's not necessary, if you want to speak, it's not necessary that you be a proponent or an opponent. You can just come forward and give your name and address for the record. If your comments are in the form of a question, the question will be noted and answered at the conclusion of the public hearing testimony portion. And at that point, the commissioners will respond, but we'll also then move to some of the other changes that the commissioners feel should be discussed in the comprehensive plan, including the direct connected streets, I presume. So with that, we will ask Director Fitzgibbons to give some opening comments.
Thank you all, and I apologize for the font. I used a template, but it looks a little funny on this computer. I apologize. I usually make it a PDF and apparently forgot in my excitement. So that says, what is a comprehensive plan? First and foremost, a comprehensive plan is a compliance document. Since the inception of they existed before the inception of the city, and what we are required to do is respond to and acknowledge the requirements of not only the state code, the RCWs, but the countywide planning policies and regional planning policies. King County is subject to the PSRC, or Puget Sound Regional Council's requirements, and PSRC actually certifies our plans. That certification means that we can qualify for grants. Without the certification, we can't get transportation grants through them. Secondly, it's a visioning document, and they require extensive public outreach, and it creates a record of the city's ambitions. As I mentioned earlier tonight, a comprehensive plan is not a grouping of laws, but rather these are goals and policies and strategies that guide public policy development in the city. The city takes its legal action from the ordinances and resolutions that are in the municipal code, as well as state code, of course, and federal code. For new development, in terms of compliance, for new development, projects have to be compliant with the city ordinances in the municipal code, as I mentioned, but the municipal code must also be consistent with the comprehensive plan policies. So we wouldn't, let's say the comprehensive plan said we want every house to be green in the city of Newcastle, that's our goal. We wouldn't go out and paint all the houses. We wouldn't have an ordinance that says all the houses in the city of Newcastle must be purple, right? It would say that they're all green to be consistent. Again, for consistency's sake, the comprehensive plan has to be consistent with the countywide planning policies, the regional planning policies, and the state. Just a couple of notes. If the plan is recommended tonight to move on to City Council, it would go to City Council on February 4th for their first deliberation, and they could hold as many additional meetings as required. Once adopted, this will go to PSRC for certification. It's about a 3-month process to get certified. Their recommendation is to be certified by September. And likely there will be an amendment to the housing element this year because we acknowledge that we have not fully responded to the requirements of the state to address housing strategies for 0 to about 80% income housing. One of the big requirements of the state and the county and the municipal, and Puget Sound Regional Council is to provide strategies for housing at different income levels. And we're such an expensive area that has been a hard thing to meet, and we're hoping to do that this summer with our middle housing. In terms of future edits, so without a public hearing, edits can be made for text and formatting errors and clarifications. However, if and probably what we will do with the city council is have a public hearing if there are edits that are directed to be made in subsequent meetings. So we would have additional public hearings because we cannot make substantive changes without a public hearing. If this moves on to another planning commission meeting, then we will again have a public hearing next month. I did want to make a note on the difference between the compliance and the visioning document before I move on, and that is that I have learned so much in this process, and I could completely see in future years having a separate visioning process so that the compliance piece comes much later after that, and we try to fit our responses into the state's mandates rather than trying to mush them all together at the same time. I think Newcastle would do great with its own separate visioning document. So anyway, that's something to look forward to in years to come. So we do have some proposed additions already from Public Works. They'd like to add 2 lines to the capital facilities plan, the generator project, and there's also upgrades needed to the annex, some deferred maintenance items, and some small renovations and updates. Sorry, these are so hard to read. The proposed changes, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna pull this down. So to policies P66, it was noted that there was some ambiguity in the policy for what the time frame for the financial strategy actually was. So the addition would be to add for completion of improvements have to happen within 6 years. This has to do with developments who have to put in infrastructure updates for concurrency. P177, Newcastle hasn't been around for very long, and so there was a request to remove the undue portion of the city shall ensure its infrastructure is developed and maintained equitably to prevent exclusionary impacts on marginalized communities. So again, removing that and undue. On P4, rather than the city ensuring fair and equal access to a range of housing types, because it is not upon the city to actually develop these housing types, but rather to remove barriers, it was suggested that we change that to support the opportunity for fair and equal access to a range of housing types. And then there was a secondary A and just a typo in that as well. And then, as we discussed earlier tonight, there was the portion on removing, goodness gracious. It's not a PowerPoint day, folks. So proposed for removal, I actually think we would like to, from what I've heard, keeping P60 is actually appropriate. However, to Commissioner Lowe's point earlier, there had been some new policy drafted that was included with the comp plan, and we checked with SCJ. We have Zoe Tapert here tonight from SCJ. She's been working hard with us since June on this project. And there was one policy in there, this regional policy about supporting and targeting economic assets unique to the region, such as airports, seaports, and research institutions. This particular one was not seen as required. So per Commissioner Lowe's comment earlier, this was the one strategy that we could take out without, I'm gonna have a double negative here, so that we'll still be responsive to all the requirements of the county and the region, even without this one, so, if that makes sense. So, I know there's a lot up for deliberation, people have comments, but this is a cheat sheet for recommendation language. I move to recommend for adoption ordinance 2024-669 as amended, which I would assume would be anything that came out of tonight, not as proposed. Or you can move to delay adoption of the ordinance until the next planning commission meeting. So with that, I'm open for questions if anything was unclear.
Commissioners, questions for Director Fitzgibbons?
I have one question, P177. Could you explain or give me an example of where exclusionary impacts are thought to, I don't think they exist here, but might otherwise somewhere exist? I don't understand.
So this would be a response to the requirements to acknowledge for all GMA cities to acknowledge, and if you want to speak to this, Zoe, you're welcome to, that there have been historic inequities. In Newcastle, this would be preventing from putting every sewage treatment plant ever right next to certain kinds of housing, or, making sure that we're not making our decisions based on what could be considered exclusionary practices. Do you want to?
Yeah, so this policy goes to what was passed in recent years at the state legislature level, HB 1220, which had sections on it that directed cities to identify and begin to undo racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion housing that has been caused by just history of local policies that could relate to everything from certain cities having racially restricted covenants in them to years of redlining and other decisions that are made on a local level there. So this was direction from the state to both address and begin to undo those impacts. That helps.
Is that required?
Yes.
But that doesn't apply to us, right? We did a study, there's no, I guess that, what is the marginalized communities? Do we have, what is the marginalized communities in city of Newcastle?
Would an example of that be if a decision were made to limit access or limit the installation of new infrastructure, so let's say like water, sewer, to parcels that were planned for step housing, because it's step housing. So you have this municipal prohibition that would preclude the construction and leasing for below 50% AMI housing. Would that be an example of something that could be an exclusionary policy that would tie back to the city infrastructure? Thanks.
That, for people who didn't catch the head movements, the answer from staff was yes. Commissioner Trauman.
Zoe, could you clarify something for me? You said that the law requires us to address or undo any of these things. Now, I'm not sure what address means, but I do know what undo means. And from my knowledge of the history of Newcastle, there's nothing desperate or prejudicial or anything like that that needs to be undone in Newcastle. There doesn't appear to be anything that we really need to address. And by doing so, it seems to, you're making Newcastle look bad just by, guilt by association. It's kind of the, do you still beat your wife type of an argument. And I don't mean to be glib about it, but do you understand what I'm saying? Just if we've never had the problem and we don't Well, I mean, you can never anticipate everything that's gonna happen, I understand that. But why are we devoting pages and pages and pages to something that may or may not happen? And in so doing, kind of besmirching our pretty little city's image.
The point of the legislation and the requirement is to open the door to conversations to understand what the history of a community is for all community members across the board, and understanding that those from a variety of backgrounds may have different lived experiences to where policies have caused harm, and
But not in Newcastle.
the legislation directed guidance in just trying to identify that as part of it. So whether there is or isn't would be through the, and I believe Aaron's pulled up charts on income and race across the board, is that correct? To help with this. To just identify, is there or is there not, or what the status is.
Well, how can we, I mean, we can try to identify everybody in this room who might be a bank robber. How are we gonna, who makes that value judgment? And why would we do something that would negatively connotate on the subject under evaluation?
I think we might be arguing a point that we've already conceded, because the language we're proposing strikes the language to undo. The language we're proposing just says the policy is to prevent anything in the future.
I understand the undo part, it was the address part that Zoe mentioned, address.
I don't think
And
our
undo.
policy says address, it says to prevent.
Okay, perhaps I misunderstood, because I wrote down address and undo and prevent, okay. So I think you're right, Charlie, maybe I made too much ado about nothing, I apologize.
So for these, so let's, getting back, Erin did her presentations, we opened the floor to questions. Are there any other questions for Director Fitzgibbons before we move to the public testimony? All right. So it's your turn, folks. We will begin with Nola Costin, and just remember there's a 3-minute limit unless you are representing an organization, in which case you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Nola Costin, over 20-year military household in Newcastle. Newcastle residents deserve a city government that serves every person with equal dignity and respect. On Monday, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Day. Dr. King wanted Americans to focus on the content of a person's character, not on the color of their skin. Diversity, DEI, is discriminatory. DEI looks at skin color and should not be included in our city's 10-year comprehensive plan. I am Chinese from Hawaii, AAPI. I oppose all DEI policies and programs. Please remove all DEI policies and programs from our city's 10-year comprehensive plan. A Newcastle resident shared a great idea, and I share it with you. Adults renting or living in homes of Newcastle residents should be counted as satisfying the need for affordable, low-income housing, and count it differently is my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Griffin.
I'm from Hazelwood. I've been in Hazelwood for over 46 years. And I appreciate the efforts that you folks have put in. You've been working on this for 2 years, really diligently, spent a lot of hours on it. It's interesting that you need to have your own specific plan You couldn't take the plan that we already had and just go through and update it and make the changes that were needed. And I think if you're going to speak about social differences, if you start making issues out of it, we may have social differences that we don't have now. So I would hope that we didn't get into that. What I would recommend to you is that we take the old plan, update it with the revised items that we need from the state and the county. And it's not going to be your plan, but it's be our plan of the city. That's what we really need. And I think it was something that we have done probably without a consultant. And I've heard that we didn't get much from our consultant, but they got our money. I wish we get that back because we would be deserving to get it back. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Next is Debbie Webb.
My name is Debbie Webb, and I've lived in Newcastle since 1976. So, longer than you. You didn't know it was a competition, did you? We raised our family here and have really enjoyed Newcastle and would love to see our city remain the small, good feel that we have now. I don't know that we need all the complexity of this new comprehensive plan. We'd love to see it only what is legally required. Thank you.
Rabbi Slobodkin.
Thank you for letting me address this esteemed body. Beit has been here for 24 years. We bought the property in 2001, and I'm the guy responsible to get the Hanukkah menorah out in the corner there every year the last, well, I don't know, 6-7 years. Hopefully we'll be able to continue that. Newcastle Fruit and Produce, and we're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and we just love being part of Newcastle. And I think Newcastle is part of our special flavor is we're kind of a bedroom community of Seattle, and I think a lot of people like to keep it that way. But I want to address some of the changes to the comprehensive plan. I believe a majority of Newcastle residents want to remain this bedroom community, kind of small and safe, with our quiet character, and not become another Seattle. There's already enough variety in housing types, and we don't want to change the character of our city. For instance, shrinking setbacks and leading to houses being built closer together, I don't think is necessary. We don't want to become, like I said, another Seattle, and incentivizing low-income housing and emergency shelters. We don't want to add language about societal racism and prejudice, normally called DEI. Someone else mentioned that earlier. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really my main focus here today as a rabbi. DEI actually increases racism by including and excluding certain segments of society. Diversity is a code word for racial preferences. Diversity is a code word for anti-meritocracy. You know, a simple example is this. I don't care what a pilot looks like, how they grew up, where they grew up, what their gender is, what their sexual preferences are, what the color of their skin is. I just want to know they know how to fly an airplane with experience and expertise. This ideology is rooted in the pernicious and false belief that America is an irredeemably racist and sexist country, which we are not. DEI training perpetuates racial stereotypes and division and can cause subtle coercive pressure to ensure conformity to a viewpoint. In several states, currently, colleges are dissolving DEI offices in cultural centers, Missouri, Kentucky, and Nebraska. The University of Texas at Austin has laid off much of their DEI staff. State legislatures are filing anti-DEI measures in their upcoming sessions. An Ohio bill that aimed to ban mandatory DEI trainings, diversity statements, and punish university employees is being passed in the Senate. Is this a timer on the right side here?
Yes.
Can you wrap up in 30 seconds?
Sure, let me try and do that. I should have timed myself before I wrote this.
I think he gets 5 minutes because he's with an organization. He's not a resident, he's representing the business.
I have heard that 5 minutes or more.
Oh, well, okay, apparently that's not a rule. I was in error. Our
So another 2 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
I can wrap up, maybe a minute and a half. Just a couple examples of what's been going on the last year. In West Virginia, an anti-DEI bill referred to as the Restoring Sanity Act will ban DEI offices, trainings, and diversity statements. Following the conclusion of a study into DEI at the state's colleges and universities, an Arkansas state senator will file a bill this year to ban DEI programs based on similar laws in Florida and Texas. An anti-DEI bill in South Carolina would prohibit DEI trainings and statements. And in Florida, anti-DEI legislation, courses that involve identity politics or teach that systemic racism, sexism, and oppression and privileges are inherent in the institutions of the U.S. may not be used for general education credits. The following companies have either removed or modified their DEI programs and initiatives: Amazon, McDonald's, Walmart, Boeing, Toyota, Coors, Ford, Lowe's, Harley-Davidson, John Deere, Tractor Company, to name a few. DEI has lowered expectations and qualifications for new hires in order to fulfill arbitrary standards created by ideologues with an agenda. DEI is discrimination at its core, primarily discriminating against white males because we're not women, people of color, gay, or transgender. I want Newcastle to be known as a city set on a hill for the rest of the state of Washington to view as healthy, strong, and vibrant, a city that is not racist, period. A city that hires and promotes based on merit, not sexual preference, gender, or skin color. And I want to end with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, by the content of their character." Thank you very much.
Next up is Lynn Privet. Thank you.
I am Lynn Privet, and I have lived in Newcastle before it was Newcastle. I've been here over 30 years. I like it here. I am not comfortable with the proposal. Pretty much the last speaker took all the words out of my mouth. DEI is exclusion. I don't want it in our neighborhood. I was president of the homeowners board for 4 years. We addressed problems civilly, lovingly, well. We can do it here. We do not need to pit people against people. We do not need a solution to a problem that does not exist. So please, in your thinking, keep that in mind. Keep us together. Keep us loving one another. Keep us thinking the best of one another, and not that we're racist, and not that we want to divide. We don't. I love this community. I hope you will keep these comments that these people have made in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Clark.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I've been up here before, and I want to say again, thank you for your efforts. It's been said already, but I know you work hard and you get little pay, like in zero, for this effort, so thank you. I took a lot of notes, so I'm going to jump all over the place and try to do it in 3 minutes. Concerning the through streets, the connectivity, right? So there was an objection to the plan here, and under the or part, allowed by another action. And one of the suggestions was, well, hey, if there's already a sign that's been up there, that people should know. But frankly, some of those signs have fallen down over time, so people don't necessarily know. So my suggestion to solve that would be a time limit. If there has been no changes to a neighborhood for 5 years, 10 years, regardless of a sign up, then that's fresh game for reevaluation. That might solve the problem of the disappearing signs, or what does that actually mean? It's just a suggestion. So, question, existing community outreach for these projects, we all know is really terrible, right? We have a mailing program and whatever. People, they just don't know, and they expect their comments to have value when they come to the hearing examiner, and the hearing examiner basically dismisses all of them because they're not a code violation or something. So my question for you guys, and this is a way to figure out if the street problem is going to work, if the existing, consider the existing Thule project, if your proposal were in place and all the people objected as they did, would the project still have been gone through, or would it have been prevented? If it would still have gone through, your policy is not effective, right? So the process then would still be faulty, and in court, and Aaron, Director Fitzgibbon, seemed to imply that it would. So my question is, consider how this policy will mesh with the existing problem we have now. If it would still be the same result, it's bad. So moving on really quickly, and I'm going to echo everything they said about the DEI stuff and the marginalized, and we got stuck up here on the word address, but there are a whole bunch of things in this plan that say things like implement exclusive engagement practices, implement programs and policies that acknowledge and empower the contribution. What does that mean? What's the policy? What is the program? That's totally subjective, right? There's no way to put a concrete answer on that. If I look back at one that really concerns me here, and I know I'm going to run out of time, but I'm going to rush here. The city shall consider social equity in planning and implementation processes. What does that mean? That's totally nebulous. Director Fitzgibbons at the beginning of the meeting said, the developer has to know what they are allowed to do or not to do within their property. There's no way they're going to look at that and figure out what that's supposed to mean. And there's all kinds of stuff in here like that. Everything like that needs to come out of this. I'm going to take 30 more seconds. Everything like that needs to come out. Because if you're a developer, are you going to know what that means? It's going to be totally subjective, and it's going to be the whim of the city at that time. That's not fair or appropriate. And it's not a reflection in our community. The whole Appendix A in this process was written to evaluate whether Newcastle was racially, historically bigoted and all that, and the answer was no. So all of Appendix A can be replaced by one sentence that says no history of Newcastle's having discrimination. And then you can get rid of all the other stuff. And it's really simple. And then people don't look at that. They're not going to read all through Appendix A to find the answer. They're going to say, oh my God, this city's crazy. They got all this racial stuff. Well, they don't. It's not there. It doesn't exist. So please get rid of all this stuff, right? I know this is going to come to the council. I'm also a resident, but I'm also the mayor, right? Now, I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote. That wouldn't be unethical, but you probably get the idea from my comments. So please clean this stuff up before it goes on, or it's going to come back to you probably. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time.
Sophia. And what's your last name, Sophia? Well, you can tell us when you get to the... Stop. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and I just want to say thank you to the council for letting me share my thoughts on the 10-year plan for the city. I'm a bit worried about the complicated environment rules and the DEI goals that don't really fit our beautiful city of Newcastle. And can we keep our plan simple and just keep it simple and true to what this city is about?
Thank you. Next is Chinmay Nagarkar. Chinmay? Or anybody whose name sounds like that, if I'm wrecking it? Okay, looks like perhaps he left. Next is Peggy Price.
I'm Peggy Price, live in Winfrey. I want to address the street connectivity. I think it's important But I think it's oversimplified, and that will lead to some problems that we already have. In order to have a developer have the confidence that they can buy a property and then subdivide it in Newcastle, we need to make sure that they understand what they're going to run into, rather than having to go to all the neighbors before they buy the property and find out what they're going to say. But at the same time, we need to be able to put enough guardrails in so that if there are very small lots, no place for kids to play, they can't just go out while their parents are fixing dinner and play baseball or whatever they're going to do. We need to address that. So if we're going to have a through street with a lot of traffic on it, ideally, we would have little bulb cul-de-sacs off of it so that kids would have a place to go and play together. Maybe that can be added. It's a challenge. It's hard to write laws and code. And thank you so much for all you've done. I know it's been a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. And then our final speaker is Mr. Fudge, Larry Fudge.
How you doing? I'm Larry Fudge. I've been a resident of Newcastle since 1987, and I've watched this city change from not a city to a city, as many of you have. And what I've witnessed along the way is that the city has not been an advocate for the residents quite often in following the procedures that the state's mandating to us. This is something I would think that the Planning Commission would be tasked to do, is represent us as a city, as our residents, much just like the council does with the mayor. So I'd say go back and visit some of these things and see if there's not a reason to fight it. Some of the things they're implementing or trying to implement upon us really don't exist here, as it's been mentioned before, and I don't see any point in rehashing many of the things I already said because they were all very well spoken, and I thank all of you for doing that. What I do see, though, is that with the neighborhood through streets here, I'm a recipient of one of them with the new neighborhood up on 125th at the end, and they put the through gate, which is now a gate, but they wanted a through traffic coming through out of Olympus up there. Well, 125th is a limited egress-ingress area. You can only escape our neighborhood by two paths. You're coming out on 125th, if you're shooting straight through, or you're going down through the little arterial neighborhoods. Now they put speed bumps in there and so forth, and you can go down bottom of the hill right here, out to Light. Now, if you start making traffic where it's 200 more vehicles coming through every day from up there because it's an easier shortcut, you're putting many people into jeopardy. Our neighborhood is a walking neighborhood. I know most of the people that walk, speak to them frequently. They know me. And I would hate to see that these people are getting thrown to the side, run over, their dogs hit, their kids hit. Not that that's all going to happen, but it's been very close for many of us since just the new neighborhood's gone up there. Had they left that gate open for Olympus, our traffic patterns would have been exponential to what they currently are. And I think it really needs to be incumbent upon you guys to, I know that we have a posting of billboards up around the areas of property use, proposed property uses, but if you're going to impact the neighborhood, it would be incumbent upon some group of people to go out and, talk to all the neighbors in the area, have a meeting with those affected and extended people. I'm down the block from that new neighborhood, yet it impacts me because my traffic pattern went from 25, 30 cars a day to about 100 coming through there probably. And fortunately, most of the people have settled down, but it was a risky thing there for the first couple of years that new neighborhood went in because they didn't respect coming down through our neighborhood. It was just the fastest way out. Just like Newcastle Way is the fastest way from 405 to Coal Creek. I don't see that should be a main arterial, yet it's becoming one. It's becoming more difficult to get out safely onto 120 or on the Newcastle Way. appreciate all your guys' efforts here, but go back and see what you can do to be advocates for the neighborhoods, for the residents. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. So at this stage, we can respond to some of these comments. I would propose this, that I'd like to have the first shot at it, and then have Director Fitzgibbons have the second shot, and then open it up to the commissioners. Are you okay with that? Okay. So when we began this process, I don't know if we did this so much with intent or if this is just the way it ended up, but our actual practice throughout this was not to make any changes unless they were requested by residents or they were imposed by law. So as we went through all of the policies in the old plan, we checked every one that was there to see if it wasn't in the new plan. And if it wasn't in the new plan, we asked ourselves, is there a reason why it was taken out? And if there wasn't a good reason, it was restored. I should say also that one of the things we did with this plan, I say we, it was our consultants who did the work, was to take our old plan and try to make it an easier document for a citizen to read and get it. I don't mean to understand it, I mean to absorb it, because the old plan was really complicated and long. And we managed to cut it from about 300 pages to 200 pages. So there were changes made that were made to restructure it, to avoid duplication, to make it easier to follow. And that was one of the reasons why we had to go back and look at those policies, because there were duplicative policies and duplicative strategies. So that was one thing we did. We tried to maintain everything in the old plan unless there was a reason to change it. And included in the old plan was a lot of language that policies had either should or shall. Shall meaning you have to do it, and should meaning you should do it. There's a lot of debate over the merit of that system, but we left it alone unless somebody really took objection to the wording and said, that's not a shall, we ought to make that a should. But we tried to be conservative with the old plan. Another thing we did was to look at all of the new policies, and there were a bunch that were there that didn't come from the citizens of Newcastle. They came from our understanding of the state and county requirements. And we basically put those in and said, okay, if those are requirements, then that's what we got to do. And we did not assume that we had the expertise to challenge that. We relied on staff, but we asked staff, our staff, about some of those, and we made some changes that you saw tonight, where we questioned those requirements, and we adopted them somewhat to match the Newcastle character. But I accept staff's opinion that we don't have a choice there. And if we are to test that opinion, I would rather it not be the commissioners that test it, but that it be tested when it comes before the city council and when the city attorney is sitting right here in the meeting. I think that's a more qualified body to be deciding. And some of the decisions are frankly political. It's, one person's DEI is another person's justice. So we took, I would say, a more technical approach to this. As technical planners, we're not planners, we're just ordinary folks, but we tried to execute a mission where we did what we heard Newcastle wanted, and we did what the state and the county required. And that's what we ended up with. And now we're at the point where we're really, we're running out of time. I think we can take more time without terrible consequences, but I myself would hate to have to go through and scrub all that language only to find out that it's required and we got to put it all back in. I wouldn't want to do that until I had somebody who understood the law a whole lot better than I did and had a law degree telling me that you can take that out. Director Fitzgibbons.
As mentioned earlier, a comprehensive plan is a compliance document, and we do have to respond to the requirements of the state, the county, and the regional commission. RCW 3670A is the source. However, the county and the state are allowed to make the requirements more restrictive, but not less. It requires a housing element ensuring the vitality and character of established residential neighborhoods. That includes an inventory and analysis of existing and projected housing needs. Units for moderate, low, very low, and extremely low income housing, emergency housing. Includes statement goals, policies, objectives, and mandatory provisions for the preservation, improvement, and development of housing, including single-family residences within their urban growth boundary. Identify sufficient capacity of land. For housing, include not limited to government-assisted housing, housing for moderate, low, very low, extremely low-income housing, manufactured housing, multifamily housing, group homes, foster care facilities, makes adequate provisions for existing and projected needs of all income segments of the community, including consideration for low, very low, extremely low, moderate income housing, documenting programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability gaps, consideration of housing locations, considering of the role of accessory dwelling units, identifies local policies and regulations that result in racially disparate impacts, displacement, exclusion, and housing included, zoning that may have a discriminatory effect, disinvestment, infrastructure availability, identifies and implements policies and regulations to address and begin to undo racially disparate impacts, displacement and exclusion in housing caused by local policies, plans, and actions, identifies areas that may be at higher risk of displacement from market forces that occur with changes to zoning development regulations, and establishes anti-displacement policies with consideration given to the preservation of historical and cultural communities, as well as investments in low, very low, extremely low, moderate income housing, equitable development initiatives, inclusionary zoning, community planning requirements, tenant protections, land disposition policies, and consideration of land that may be used for affordable housing. This is why we see this in the plan. The regional requirements and the county's requirements are more restrictive than this. We don't do it to cast Newcastle in a bad light. We do it so that we can have a compliant plan that moves forward. If I agree with Charlie that if the desire is to take out anything that is required under these codes, it's best to do it with the city attorney present. I appreciate the sentiments of the people of Newcastle and the community's desires. I really do. We put this data in because it was a requirement. I do want to mention, in response to Mayor Clark's comment, that I also wanted to mention that the connected streets would have not resulted in what the tool development is existing with today, because one, we would have asked the developer if there was another solution. They would have said, yes, we can put in cul-de-sacs. And two, the plat language, as I mentioned earlier, said north-south connection, not east-west. so those would have been stopping blocks. I am here to serve the city and the will of this planning commission. We all are. But a lot of the new changes that everyone sees in this document is not because we sat down and thought it was a good idea. It really is because of what's being handed down from the state. So I hope you understand that, and it's not an easy decision to make. But if there's any questions I can answer, please let me know.
Okay, commissioners who'd like to respond to the public testimony or to ask questions of Director Fitzgibbons or any staff member of the consultants?
So I have a go back to my earlier comment in terms of the King County and the Puget Sound regional requirement, and I think it is more a recommendation or alignment. I think I probably interpret it differently, very differently, because those King County planning policy, emergency housing, those are their policy guidance. So are we required to have that, or that is recommendation, alignment?
So it is alignment. I think they use, this is my first comp plan, but I think they use the words, there's encouraged, there's recommended, and there's must. And I think when they say they recommend, because we don't have to write things exactly as they write them, but we have to address that policy. We do have to address the policy somehow. So that's where we can get into semantics, but.
So we have to address the policy to build the 288 beds?
We absolutely do.
That's not a recommendation?
That is
That's a
not-
requirement?
It is a requirement. So in the RCW, that is 2 housing, subsection A, 2 emergency housing, emergency shelters, and permanent supportive housing. Absolutely required.
But the target, the number?
The target is our allocation. Just like the 500 new jobs and the 1,400 new units. Yeah, it's the same thing.
I guess, yeah, sorry, I couldn't really grasp why we don't have the problem and why we must have a solution to solve, to build a 288 emergency housing for people. I'm not, how should I say, I'm not saying we don't help people, but we don't have that problem on hand. And also, in our plan, so that's actually, like, as I said, I was thinking all those targets, the step housing, all that is alignment. That's what I thought it can be removed if it's alignment, not mandates, right? Because there are a lot of, in our housing elements, basically addressing that. And also including emergency housing capacity. I think there's a table there. If I read it right, does that mean those emergency housing will be built in the R4 and R6 zone?
So we don't have to build it, but we have to show that we have capacity.
We have capacity, but we are saying the capacity is in R4, R6 zone, which is single family.
Go ahead.
Yes, so the state has imposed requirements that anywhere, any zone that allows residential has to allow emergency housing. And so then when we do the capacity analysis, which again is not the city going to build these units, it's not the city partnering with anyone to build these units, it's not the city requesting anyone to build these units. It's merely stating that if someone wanted to come in and build these units, or in this case, put these beds, 283 beds, don't think of it as 283 houses, that the city would have to be able to show legally that it had enough land to accommodate them, or that it could, or it would have to amend its zoning to accommodate.
You have to turn it back on.
I'm still on? Okay. And so this was an exercise we needed to do to meet this state requirement for theoretical capacity. And this would assume just that one on these lots, that it would be a single house type structure that would get built that might have multiple beds in it, but it was not, but that the capacity, or that the capacity of the structures would be small. It was not saying that we could build a large homeless shelter in any given place around the city. I want to be very clear about that. And so yes, this was designed to meet the letter of the state requirements, and that it is not a city policy for building anything. It is merely showing that it is theoretically possible to build on existing vacant land. And this prevents us then from needing to make further zoning changes to accommodate those units.
I might add to that a temporary housing or emergency housing could look like a cottage housing development. It could look like ADUs. It could look very similar to what you already see. It doesn't mean that we're going to build, or we would allow. I mean, we don't currently allow multifamily in the R6 and R4 zones without a conditional use permit, and that's not the intent of what we're working on this summer. So, you know, these have to be allowed, but they don't, right now, we don't have to allow something beyond what we would currently allow in the zoning in terms of bulk and dimension.
Quick question.
Commissioner Kack?
I just wanted to understand, did we have the same requirements in our previous comp plan as well? No, is this the new addition that is, okay.
It's very new, and it's got everybody running late and running amok.
Commissioner Blocker?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm seeing news notes that our legislature is considering rent control issues and everything this year. From what I know of my city here, I couldn't afford to buy and move into this city now. I bought and moved in here 42 years ago. I couldn't do it now. I can't see that anywhere in Newcastle is going to be the kind of place where anybody's going to come build emergency housing beds, or beds for emergency housing. Get my tongue turned around. It just doesn't add up. There isn't that much vacant land in Newcastle to begin with, unbuilt land. There are pieces here and there, as we're aware. I can't make it work in my head.
I don't think that's a unfair thing to say. I think that's very true. I don't think the land is inexpensive enough. You were going to say something, Tyler or Zoe?
So I'd agree that practically speaking, I wouldn't expect that to happen. But there was a theoretical exercise that needed to be done to show capacity. And so I did look at our city's data on land and find that there is enough parcels available that it could theoretically, that someone could theoretically do it if they had all of the money needed to develop it. That doesn't mean that it's going to be economical. That doesn't mean that they're going to be really good pieces that are sought after for this. but it means that they meet the theoretical requirements of the capacity built exercise. And that is why the table is the way that it is.
Commissioner Love?
Yeah, Aaron, I also have another follow-up question. I think on the email you responded to me related to the requirements, you also mentioned King County said that they will not sue us and will not bring us to the GMA hearing board. So what does that exactly mean?
So noncompliance with, so there's the grant portion of it. I don't think that you would see King County bringing a city that looks like they're trying to be responsive in front of a board. But that doesn't mean that we're not open for groups like FutureWise to take us to the Growth Management Hearings Board. That's what, when you're not compliant, that's what you get served and you end up going before this particular board that deals with the GMA. And then it's a lawsuit.
But I guess in what way they say they will not sue us, or they will?
Yeah, because the AHC, as part of their, I think it was part of their letter, if I remember correctly, stated that as part of the let's see here. As part of the process, they recommend that cities who get their responses too late to adopt on time. On time would have been December 31st of 2024. That would have been on-time adoption of our comprehensive plan. So even at this point, we're at risk of a suit, but so are a lot of other jurisdictions, to be honest. So cities who, they recommended that they go through a housing amendment process to incorporate any feedback that we get from the county to bring us into compliance after adoption. So adopt and then go through an update. So that's where they're saying, we're not going to bring you, if this is the process you decide to take, we're not going to come after you. That's not they want to be collaborative, as long as we meet their rules.
So as I remember, like one of their comments is related to the racial renter burden. I think they specifically called out saying I don't want to misspeak the term they use, but I think they called out saying Black and African American, Hispanic, and Latino renters. So specifically, they picked on the renters, not homeowners, saying they are basically renter the burden. I mean, if I don't know if here, and ask a city to basically will need to have engagement, trying to, I guess, reduce the burden. I guess that, this basically has, I think I can resonate a lot of people saying this basically is the DEI thing, right, in this plan. And you can say why you specifically pick non-white renters and what exactly city need to do. And also it's kind of interesting just to pick renters, because if you go back to the table earlier, has the ownership, cost of burden, all that, you can see same group of African American racial group. They are actually majority of people do not have cost burden owning a house, but it's the renter. It's just a feel like cherry picking. People want to make the point and want you to do something, it's basically, DI driven, right? I think this is the one here. Can
So-
see.
Yeah, so this was something that, it does show that there are cost-burdened households in the city. It shows that a majority of households are not.
Yeah,
It does
that's
show
true.
that more renters are cost-burdened than not. More cost-burdened, those who are cost-burdened are more than those who are owners. That's what it shows. This is the data we were asked to show. And then in addition, I think you mentioned something about outreach? Because this is the text from, this is our comment log, and this is how we responded to it. So this was.
What is a
data that
comment
was-
log?
The top, on your screens?
No, could you explain what it is?
Yeah, so this is, what we did as staff was we put all the comments that we received from the different jurisdictions, with the exception of PSC didn't make it in here, but they had very small, we just have a separate letter, comments. But what we did was we put them all into a table. You can see there are different tabs down at the bottom, and then this is how we went through and responded to everyone. So here is the AHC. They requested additional documentation on different data points, which we included. Sorry, it's kind of mind of its own. Okay, 6. Documentations and finding from its public involvement process. Maybe this is what you're referring to. Input from community members through regular and special planning committees, town halls, etc. Findings from this outreach do not describe key takeaways from the engagement. Most disproportionately impacted by housing cost burden.
Yeah.
So then we added back in, when we were working, we did a middle housing grant to start looking into the middle housing requirements. And we're wrapping that up this year. And part of that was that we partnered with Arch, who is our affordable housing partner, and a few other Arch member cities, to discuss, or to reach out to community-based organizations who might represent some of these typically underrepresented groups. And so we just took that report that came from that effort as part of the grant and put it in the comp plan. It's an appendix, it's in here, and then there's a quick blurb about it in the main body of the text now, I believe. I think we said we were responsive, and you can, we also did this project, and then you can, or we also were part of this, and you can read it here. It was, we did our effort to respond to that.
What other questions do you have? Commissioner Van Etta.
I don't have so much questions, just a few comments. So, we've been doing this for 2 years. At the start of it, we did a lot of outreach. We did a survey, we were at concerts and Newcastle Days, all that stuff. The thing I think we heard the loudest was, people want Newcastle to stay like it is today. And as much as we heard that, I think we tried to honor that as best we could by just incorporating the minimum state or King County or whatever requirements. Can you fight those requirements? I don't want to make that call personally. That's, I think, more of a city council lawyer question. I think what's in our plan is, a fair start, and I guess I wouldn't change it that much. And then just one comment to Mayor Clark. On Appendix A, the benefit of including it is it shows people we've done our homework. That we've actually took the time to study the history to show that, yeah, none of that stuff really does apply. And I think that's valuable to show that versus just having people assume, because if you don't show it, they might ask, like, what are you going to do with these different communities or incomes. And one final comment is kind of to, other comments that have been happening here is, this is a very pricey place to live. All of these things, it's a 20-year plan. It's gonna take somebody with money to come in here and make any of these things happen, and they might not happen at all. So you gotta kind of taper things, you know, like, will it actually happen? I don't know. We'll see. I don't think it's gonna change that much just because the price of land is expensive. People are gonna, and you know, developers do what makes them money. They will build a big house if that's what makes the most money versus a duplex, even though people would like duplexes to increase housing. We'll see.
Other comments or questions?
I think we did do a lot of outreach. We did back in 2023, open house, all that. But I don't think that King County's planning policies, those step housing requirements, or that Appendix A, I don't think that one is well communicated. I think most people didn't see until the draft basically made available. To be fair, that one is also coming to us very late in the process. So I just feel like I don't think I can resonate to people's response when read all this is not, it's different from what they think we've been putting together as a plan when we did outreach. And I mean, I think that's I'm kind of getting.
What do you think we can do about it?
But I feel there's no consensus. I mean, at least from the feedback, people we will just adopt what we have here. I heard a lot of people talking about being simple, going back to our older plan. You know, that's and add the required, the must mandate, I guess, in a way. But it's also on another thing, I was like, we don't know if it will be certified until we heard from I guess, the GMA or the King County, right? So there's, I guess, it is a lengthy process, right? We adopt a plan, we send it to the review board, then they tell us if they're not going to certify us or not. And I will assume they will give us time. I mean, that's what they're saying, like a year or so, right? For us to basically adopt. So in another way, I guess I'm saying is, I don't, yes, we probably will eventually need to get a lawyer, but on the same time, we probably don't just assume it will be, I mean, we will have some, I guess, consequence in compliance risk, or I don't know, I just feel like the process is probably still lengthy process, and it's also with the changing environment. I will not be surprised if those interpretations will be changing along the way.
So what do you think the commission should do tonight about the comprehensive plan?
I mean, I'm not going to speak to for all of you.
No, just for yourself.
Yeah, for myself, I will not vote to go recommend the plan as it is to the city council.
And what would the next step, what would be the next step you take? If we didn't recommend a plan tonight, what would you recommend be our next step?
I mean, obviously, we are we basically need to have a plan, right? We still, so we need to go back to the drawing board, and we probably can, start, not to take, basically undo what we did, but really just, I think as you mentioned earlier, we started, the principle is really not changing much, but only add what must put in the plan. So I will say go back to our original plan.
Commissioner Troutman?
Thank you, Chair. I've kind of been holding back here and listening to what everybody else has to say. I'm the new guy, so I obviously respect what my predecessors here have to say, but I've got a beautiful script here, 2 pages, double-spaced, and I can just about throw it away because over the course of the conversation, things have changed a little bit. But I think that there's still some pertinence to what I have to say, and then unfortunately for you kind souls, I'm going to get off the script a little bit, and you're going to have to come along with me a little bit. So first of all, a statement was made this evening that said the community can't be the deciding body on policies. And that is not the first time I've heard that statement. I've heard that statement from a source several pay grades up. Now, and I've got a little bit of a problem with that. It may well be the way it works, but the community can't be the deciding body. Well, that might be the case, but don't we as a commission represent the community? And as such, can't we be the deciding body? That's just a comment that I had to scribble in between the lines of my Academy Award-winning script here. So if you'll excuse me while I look around and find out where I'm supposed to be. And I can't believe you guys are all still here. It's a beautiful thing. Like I say, I'm used to sitting in that chair where Mr. Campen is, normally all by my lonesome. So the more people, come back again next time, please. I don't know if there'll be chow, but, maybe we can work something out. But seeing you here is great. Shout out to Pastor Darren and his family, both genetic and congregational. Sophia, thank you for coming, honey. You were very brave to get up here and speak. That takes on. You can hear my voice is kind of cracking a little bit. I'm a little nervous myself. So, but thank you for coming. This is going to be kind of a baptism by fire, both procedurally and just kind of rocking the boat amongst my new compatriots here. So if I just beg your indulgence as I go through some of this. But based on what the audience has said, and I know just everybody in this audience. I can call you out by name. I know every one of you. And I think I like every one of you as well. That doesn't happen very often. But at any rate, based on what a lot of the people in the audience have said and my own personal discomfort with some of the elements in the plan and just some kind of inside track knowledge that I have because I attend all the council meetings as well. I don't think it's advisable to put forward the plan that we have originally intended to put forward. It's not really for the council to straighten it out, and I don't, I think we're better suited to straighten it out. Now, there's going to be some legalities and things like that. Yeah, that's going to end up in their court probably, but I think it's our duty to present them with the best product that we can, and then, that's our job, is to represent the people and do what they think, and they've told us a lot tonight. Now, I really appreciate it. I've sat through all these meetings with you folks, and I know what you've gone through to get to here, and I appreciate it. I don't doubt for a minute the sincerity and the motivation of anybody on the panel here. But based on what the public has told us, it seems like we've reinvented the wheel. And, you know, in the 2035 plan, the previous plan, the one that we're abiding by now, you know, that was an old wheel, but it worked. It wasn't too shiny, but it was round, and it rolled us around to where we're at now. And that plan seemed to work within the confines of what was required at the time. And like I say, furthermore, we've had lots of public input, which tacitly approves what was in that old plan. They're saying, hey, we liked the way it was. And they don't like what's in the new plan. So, you know, the commission here, the planning commission, they conducted penny polls, open houses, and they sent out a citywide mailer, which statistically we got a lot, and I say we because I'm a we now, we got, you know, almost 500 responses. And statistically, that's unbelievable because everybody just throws those things in the trash. So we got 500, which makes the input statistically significant, and I think we should pay attention to that. City Council did the same thing. They had town halls, and they had, the city every 2 years puts out a citizen satisfaction survey that everybody who's got a mailbox gets, and if you get one, I suggest that you fill it out. It's the only way that you're gonna, not the only way, but it's the best way, because you get checked off statistically on what people think. So if you get that, you know, please fill it in. The problem is that the critical concerns and desires of the public are routinely ignored, and that appears to be in deference to advancing either political or social agendas, but it doesn't seem to be what the people want. And meanwhile, the citizens have been, you know, pretty clear about what they want. Overwhelmingly, you know, at a thematic level, they're saying, keep Newcastle, Newcastle. Don't reinvent the wheel. So, you know, I think that using the old plan as a template, the simplest thing to do would be to build on that foundation. It's kind of what you guys did, but somewhere along the line, things got a little bit messed up, or didn't, I'm saying they're messed up, but they didn't pan out the way I thought they were going to. If we take the old plan and remove outdated materials, like there's stuff in there about buying a city hall and things like that, and then add only the minimum requirements that are being foisted on us by outside forces. And by the way, I haven't seen any funding coming from those outside forces to help enact any of this stuff. So that seems a little bit strange to me. I know on a constitutional level, at the federal level, the feds can't tell the state to do something unless they provide you some money for it. So that's another story we should probably deal with some other time. But back to the plan, those minimum requirements, from what I can tell, focus a lot on allowing for housing, differences of housing, ADUs, duplexes, and such. Now, what's actually required is where I have a little bit of problems. And thanks for bearing with me, folks. I've asked for interpretations. My predecessor, Jim Quigg, tasked Director Fitzgibbons with, we've got this big fancy spreadsheet that lists everything, and out in one column it's supposed to say whether an item is required, requested, suggested, or whatever. And I don't know if that actually ever got totally filled out, but some of the responses over there say, you know, is it required? Yes-ish. Half true, maybe, question mark. So I am not a lawyer. I've talked to a lawyer about some of the things that I'm going to get to coming up. But if something's required by law, yeah, we're stuck with it, folks, I'm sorry. We're just flat stuck with it. My question is, who's interpreting the law? And I have reservations about the way I see things a little bit differently. The other thing, and I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent here, if enough cities, you know, we get a bunch of cities together, Woodinville, Carnation, all the little guys like us together, and we don't do it, King County's gonna have to, somebody's gonna have to stand up and pay attention to us. I'm not suggesting that just yet, but that's my mentality, is that, you know, nothing keeps us from pushing back. It's uncomfortable, but if you need a point man to do that, look me up, because, you know, we can't just sit here and take it all the time. I'm not suggesting we do that, Chair Gadzik. I want to make this as smooth as possible, trust me. So, and I see a lot of frowns and head shaking here, like, where's this guy going? We're on a deadline. You know, we don't have time to do this. It's going to take all kinds of scrambling to get this done. It's going to be way too much work. Well, not really. Recently, and I mean very recently, I was fortunate enough to get together with a group of people that are a lot smarter than I am. And in short order, we went through the old plan and we looked at the things that were required, the things that were outdated, and the things that we might want to change. And they encapsulated that into what I believe addressed the public's concerns, definitely is going to make the plan more palatable to the council. And so, with your permission, hot off the presses, I've got, as Chair Gadzik suggested as I was rocking the boat at my orientation meeting, to make a list of things. So this is a list of simple things. Now, the old plan was, I don't know, about maybe this thick. The new plan is, you know, significantly thicker. And that was supposed to be streamlined. I don't understand how you increase the bulk of something to streamline it. If we add these 3 pages, or the suggestion on these 3 pages that I have here, to the old plan, I think it will meet the intent of what the citizens want. Now, it's not quite as simple as I'm making it out to be. Like I say, there's going to be some legalities and whatnot, but I can't in good conscience recommend going forward with what was planned. And so after a little discussion, after we take a peek at these things, I'd be willing to make a motion to take these things into consideration as opposed to what we had originally planned, unless we want to vote now. Too soon? Okay. Well, let me get these out to you for, you know, future consideration.
While Commissioner Troutman is passing those out, I recall saying that I don't recall saying don't rock the boat. I recall saying you'll get more focused attention if you propose your suggestions in writing. I didn't ever just discourage you from rocking the boat, sir.
I won't dispute that. Chair Gadzik, I was speaking in, so.
And I would also disagree with one of your assertions about the length of the plan. I will say that if you compare the stack of paper that we got earlier this week with the stack of paper that the original plan was, that's definitely true. But the part of the plan that is comparable, which is the elements and the policies, that is shorter. So everything else is just extra stuff that was required.
Extra stuff, okay.
Yeah. But the plan itself, the part that a citizen would go to understand what the city's vision and policies are, that is shorter.
That's why you get the big bucks, Shirley. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna, you know, not gonna fall on that hill. So, I apologize for upsetting the apple cart here, but, you know, either go big or go home, I guess. And You know, if we're really representing the will of the citizens, you know, I think that this is the way to go. If we're just gonna tell people what to do and how to do it, maybe I misunderstand the mission of the council and the commission here, but I really appreciate you guys hanging out as long as you have and listening to me blather on. I might be not the best speaker, but trust me, I believe my heart's in the right place, and I want to do what you people want, and I want to be as effective and efficient and cooperative with my fellow commissioners here. So it's going to take me a while to get that all meshed together, but stick with me, and we're going to make Newcastle like we want it. So back to you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other commissioners, would you like to comment or ask questions?
I guess just as I look at what's been put in front of me for the first time, it looks like there's discussion about, or notes related to House Bill 1110 and the new housing density requirements. And it looks like there is language that addresses connected streets versus not connected streets. And it looks like there's also language related to the level of service standards for parks. Is that a fair summary of what I'm seeing here in terms of the substantive changes?
I'd say that's a fair assessment, with the comment that some of these things have been somewhat addressed by things that we've spoken about tonight. Okay. And they're, you know, these aren't cast in stone, but they're definitely topics of discussion to justify a drastic change of course from what was originally planned this evening.
Great, thanks. So I think that's what we've got here. And I guess I just want to go back to someplace where Charlie started tonight, which is the way that this process was undertaken is we started with our prior comp plan, and we went through every single bit of it. And we determined what is there that is consistent with what we're hearing the people of Newcastle say they want the community to be, which is consistent with what it's been. We heard that again tonight. And what I've heard recently, I've heard that there's a concern about connected streets, which I think we've taken under advisement and we've been working toward a solution on. The other things I've heard people voicing concerns about are things that I think we've determined in the process are requirements, things like the middle housing. The one exception would be level of service on the parks, which I think we're requesting, or excuse me, we're not requesting, we're considering exploring a change in that standard. Is that a mischaracterization of that? But
it's included, but parks is not a required element either, so we could omit the whole thing.
So the level of service for the parks aside, and not to minimize that, you know, I guess my perspective on the 2-year process that we've been through is that it has been responsive to the feedback that we received through that 2-year process. And what we've done is we've tried to layer that in to what we had as an existing document. You didn't have a commission. I realize that there are some people here who are fairly new to the commission, and I can see that you have been here for many of the meetings, and I'm grateful for that. But this wasn't some sort of a off the cuff, we're going to just create something new. This was very much a process that was steeped in the prior plan, preserving as much of it as we could, as Jared Gadzik has pointed out, and layering in to the minimum extent possible what the legal requirements are. And I think Aaron would probably agree that I was as much of a pain in the neck about that and quizzing her on, do we have to do this as anybody on the commission through the 2-year period? So I feel qualified to make that comment. I don't think I have heard specific commentary on things that we should change, that are things that are not legal requirements that have been added, that are things that have been changed or carried forward from the old plan that are not consistent with either feedback we received or the vision that was outlined in the old plan. I hear a lot of people saying we should go back to the old plan. That's where we started. We preserved that to the extent that we could, consistent with feedback and conceding legal requirements. So I'm still a little bit befuddled here because after a 2-year process, I'm not hearing anybody saying, with the exception of Connected Streets, which we've been discussing, you really missed the boat on this point. Now, I'm open to having those conversations personally, but I guess I would love some specific input on, hey, look, you know, your future land use map, that's really messed up, right? And I can tell you why. It should really look like this instead of that. Or in terms of economic development, you've adopted a whole lot of new concepts here that just don't make any sense because this isn't what the city of Newcastle is about. I'm not hearing anybody bringing that kind of specific commentary to the table. I'm just hearing people saying, wait, we don't have a new document that really reflects what the people of Newcastle want. I'm not hearing what that is, with the exception of people don't like the housing requirements, people don't want connected streets. And we've been talking about those things. So I guess I would love to know, what is there in the, you know, what's related to infrastructure that should be different here, or what's related to our land use element that should be different here, or or economic development that we're not doing in this plan that we're proposing, something that is consistent either with community feedback we received or the old plan. I'd love to hear it. And I'm not just saying that to be snarky. I mean, if we miss something here, let's get it out there and be specific about it instead of just saying, well, we need to go back and look at the old plan again. We spent 2 years doing that. So let's talk about what's wrong.
Commissioner Keck, you haven't weighed in yet. Commissioner Keck, you haven't weighed in yet. I'd be interested in hear your comments.
So, since I have been here just a little over 4 months, and I wasn't here when the outreach was done, so I am intently listening to everything. Where I'm going to use the word befuddled. Where I'm befuddled is, if we did so much outreach in the last 2 years, did the residents not get to hear about the new additions that were coming, or the new changes that were happening to the comprehensive plan? Was this just thrown at them? Because there seems to be so much confusion with respect to that. They just don't seem to even know that, you know, there's going to be, you know, stuff related to step housing, for instance, or low-income housing. So that's where my confusion is, and maybe somebody can clarify it for me.
A lot of that came very late in the process. Like in the fourth quarter of last year is when a lot of that first became known to us. And maybe, Aaron, you can be more accurate about this, but it didn't come, that step housing stuff did not come during the time when we were having open houses, and at that point, we knew about the duplexes, but we didn't have the detailed guidance that we've been talking more about tonight. And so that's true. We didn't have that. What I've been hearing mostly tonight is objections to the provisions that are aimed at marginalized populations or racial minority groups. I haven't heard criticism of all the rest of the plan. And what I hear Commissioner Troutman saying is, let's throw the whole thing out and start over. I heard you say, let's throw the whole thing out and start with the 2035 plan and make some changes there. So that's throwing out the whole draft of the 2044 plan that we've been working on for the past few years. So that seems like more than, assuming we all want to address the DEI type stuff, which I still feel is there because it's a requirement of state law, and if we don't put it in there, we're going to be forced to put it in there. But I don't see even changing that as a good argument for throwing out all the other work that we did after listening for 2 years to everything that people said. So, excuse me, Commissioner Blocker, I haven't heard from you yet, and I'd like to hear just some general comments.
Being probably the most junior here, because Commissioner Troutman has been at most meetings for the council and the planning commission, and very active in the city, so I'm kind of the junior guy here. I think a lot of what I'm hearing, both from previous meetings with the connected street issues and the desired continued character and nature of Newcastle from the penny pole and the other kinds of things that you all did first. I think a lot of people are very bothered by what apparently, and I guess it would have been helpful perhaps if Director Aaron had gotten the documentation to us that actually showed what was minimal and what was absolutely required kind of thing, that we could go through what we have clipped together now to actually kind of sort it out. But I think back to where I started, I think what a lot of people are taking strong exception and objection to are the notion that the legislature and the county are telling us that we're racist, that we're prejudiced, that we're preventing people of color, economic income levels from moving here or being able to consider moving here. And I don't think we like being called racist or any of those kinds of things. And I think some of the language that Aaron brought up and read earlier, if we go back to like page 56 here, requirements of the statute, we see actually where apparently it's coming directly from the legislature to us, in which case probably we have no opportunity to push back on it successfully. But going back to the kind of point that I made a little earlier, I don't understand why we have to do that, because the land values in Newcastle are such that these other kinds of housing are just not going to appear here. They just simply are not. And property taxes aren't going down as far as I know, so land values aren't going to go down. So I guess what it really comes to me is I don't like to have a legislative body sit in Olympia or one in downtown Seattle and tell us we have to do things that simply don't fit Newcastle. I don't know a way around that, but that's where my personal view is. So I don't know that helps. It just tries to explain, I think, where I'm at.
At this point, I'd like to go back to public testimony for a bit and give Rob Clark another opportunity to testify. We're still in the public hearing, yeah, we never closed it. Would you speak up at the microphone so we can hear you?
So I realize this is not protocol for the public hearing. I apologize for that, but I've been listening to everything you have to say. I see a deadlock here. I have a proposed idea for you to consider, right? So I don't doubt at all that you know, because I've been in these meetings. You guys took the plan, the original plan, you went through it, you beat it to death. I get it. There's stuff that came late to the table the public didn't see. That's probably causing some contention. I was concerned and kind of surprised to hear that, in fact, you said, Charlie, that, well, we really don't know what the lawyer's going to say, and I'm paraphrasing, because we haven't really vetted it. So I would have thought that would be something that you would have already, before it comes to the council, like, yes, this state says it's required, but we're sure that it has to be required. But if it comes to the council and we have the lawyer, it's going to be kind of vague again. Like, is it really required? He's going to have to go look. So maybe that part of it needs to be vetted before it comes to the council, because throughout the plan, there are vague, and I mentioned it before, statements such as initiatives should be developed, implement programs, establish policies, shall consider, implement measures, racially disparate impacts. These are all subjective terms. And last year, the Supreme Court, for the federal level, in Loper Bright versus Raimondo, said, hey, you federal government, you can't just make vague laws anymore and let the bureaucrats figure it out. That was the Chevron deference. You can't do that. Now, that was the same thing is in this, the housing bill. It's all these vague terms that I just said. So it can be interpreted by anybody. So how is it that we as the city are supposed to know exactly what the state wants? It's too vague. So we need a lawyer, perhaps, to tell us, but even then, it's interpretation. We think in Newcastle, this racially disparate means this, Woodinville thinks that, Snohomish thinks that. It's crazy. So in my opinion, all of this stuff is subjective. It doesn't need to be in there. Now, this plan is going to be reviewed by the county or whatever, then let them tell us, you know, they're not going to immediately fine us or sue us. They're going to say what's going on, and we have a chance to discuss it and get clarification, maybe get clarification from the state. But it's too vague. So I would suggest, as a solution before it comes to the council, and Scott was perfectly right, what other elements, and a lot of this stuff, I've gone through the entire book myself, and the things that stand out are what I'm talking about, also with the streets, which I addressed earlier. So take these things, send it to Curtis, whatever, let's get some clarification. And these are the issues that everybody's concerned about. And if we can solve that, and the Appendix A, and Paul, you said something interesting. Appendix A tells us we did our job, but if you read through Appendix A, then it just proves that we don't need to have any of this in there, because Appendix A says we're fine. So Appendix A, should it stay, get rid of everything else, because we proved that we don't need it. So we can tell the state or the county who reviews this that, hey, we have this Appendix A, we did the study, and none of this applies to Newcastle. And instead, it substitute one sentence or one term that says something like, all people are welcome in Newcastle, regardless of background, race, whatever, right? And so that's kind of my solution. Let's get a legal opinion, or just simply say Appendix A, we proved that none of this is true, we don't need it, and let the state or the county come back to us and say, yeah, and we can fight about it. But it's too vague for us, for you guys, and the council's going to be the same way. What does this mean? If we're going to have the same discussion on February 4th, should it go forward? Let's stop now, address all of these vague terms, and see if what really, really has to stay. Curtis said to me, if you don't include all this stuff, you're going to lose $1 million or something. Well, that's the thing I can put together in my head. But if he says, well, it's, probably not really necessary, then we'll know. So hope that gives you a little guidance. And thank you for allowing me to interrupt out of order in this public hearing. But I just, I see there's a little conflict, and I wanted to help out.
Director Siemens.
It seems to me that most of the discomfort is around the DEI requirements, which are in the code. So they're required. If we could have Appendix A as a separate document that was referenced, Would that make this commission more comfortable? The work has been done. It's available, but if it was not included as an appendix to the comp plan, but rather by reference, would that be better?
Commissioner Marsh?
Would, when you say it would be a separate document, it would be referenced, how would that be I mean, would it be a separate document that would be adopted by or recognized by the city council in some way, like a, you know, like a visioning plan would be, or the Lake Boren master plan? So it would be an official city document, it just wouldn't be attached, it would be referenced? Or do you have something else in mind?
Correct, yeah. So my thought would be that it would be, in fact, we could do this possibly we could do this with all the appendices. Just like we've done, like in the transportation chapter, we reference the work that was done by the 2020 master plan, correct? It was adopted by council. And I think as a reference document, I'd have to find out from the city attorney what that would look like. But if just having that, like Mayor Clark said, we've done our homework. We haven't found, now I'm going to say that it would be redacted from title anyway, so we wouldn't be able to find a title document, a new title document showing redlining or any sorts of, we wouldn't be able to find that because it's redacted. But we can put a blurb that says, you know, the city didn't find anything, all the work was done, and you can find that work by this separate RDI document.
Commissioners, anyone who believes that separating that appendix from the document would change their view about moving it forward, would you please speak up?
I think it's a good start, regardless of whether we move, regardless of which plan we move forward with. I think that was something that could be considered as a move in the right direction, because it takes away the kind of negative association that could be inferred about Newcastle. I mean, if someone wants to make a bad judgment of Newcastle, they're going to have to work a little bit to be able to do that. And quickly, Chair Gadzik, my choice of words isn't always the greatest, and it was never my intent to disparage anybody on this commission. Like I say, I've sat out there and watched you guys work your hearts out, and that's why I felt confident bringing something controversial to you, because I've seen you guys in action. I know that you're up to any task, but I was not in any way, I mean, I got off on the wrong foot perhaps, and you know, if somebody felt that way, I apologize. Commissioner Marsh, I've got, if I want to talk about specific things, you mentioned economic development and things like that, none of those things were included in the list, so, but the things that are included in the list, and I acknowledge some of those have already been partially addressed. It's just kind of a guiding document to introduce the concept of not just going full speed ahead with what was originally planned, and maybe step back a little bit and have a review before we go that far. Again, thank you for bearing with me.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yeah, I kind of, Scott asked the question earlier, kind of got me thinking really is what in this document specifically I want to remove or I don't like, right? And I thought about it. I think there is almost like you are writing there is a hypothesis and then you're trying to prove it. And I fundamentally do not really agree on this hypothesis. So like in the housing elements, all the housing costs, all those paragraph tables, just from kind of a coherence, I don't even think some of those data really make the point. And like for example, under housing costs, the table 5, median housing costs in Newcastle and King County. The comparison is a median gross rent and average home price. You cannot really, how this is a reflection of median housing cost. And then basically that's what I'm saying, it's like this a whole reasoning, I just couldn't, I don't think this, basically this is like under, I think there is a hypothesis, and it's also tied to the Appendix A, and trying to support that is Newcastle is unaffordable, or it's not for all income levels, and we need to achieve all those. But again, that's what I'm saying, this is not really our problem here. We don't need to, I mean, I guess like if I use the example as airplane, and you don't have 3 classes of airplane for every airplane. Some is just too small. 777, 787, you can have first business class and economy, but 737, you don't have first class. We are a small city, 12,000 population residents, and 70% of people own the house, and we have, less renter than owner. People afford to live here. Do we see the cost owning a house? It's more expensive to owning a house? Yes, definitely. But do we actually really need to, doing all those things, including step housing, all that, and have, spend the time doing study, and saying, I understand doesn't mean we are actually going to build tomorrow, but we're saying we have a plan, we have capacity, we can do those things. It's just it's not our reality. That's what I want to say. We are a small city, and I guess that's also really probably the time to really ask the lawyer what is exactly we need to put in the plan to meet the minimum legal requirements.
Do any other commissioners want to comment on whether or not separating that appendix makes a difference in their view about the recommendation?
I would just like to quick comment. I think that would be a good start. I would second Len on this and say that, yeah, that would be a good start. Let's see where it takes us, but just having an Appendix A separately would definitely be helpful.
I personally don't have any concern with having it be a separate referenced document. I mean, it seems to me that it's a functional equivalent, whether it's an exhibit or something that's separate. I think it's all ultimately predicated on whether or not the city council is going to adopt it as a separate document or not, which I think is an assumption, right? So, and I don't know how much that changes from the city council standpoint, if it's a separate document or if it's an appendix. So, and I do appreciate the comment that it does separate it somewhat from the substance of the comp plan. So somebody looking at the comp plan, maybe it's not, it doesn't create the same optics around it. In that regard, I think if there's a benefit to doing that, to meeting the requirements that we need to meet while still satisfying people that, hey, look, this is not the reality of the experience that we think people have in Newcastle, then I don't know why we wouldn't pick a form that people are comfortable with, because the substance remains the same.
Well, I have a suggestion for our next step. The first part is I don't think we have a consensus to move the plan forward tonight. I think you would all agree with that. I think that a big question is whether or not a lot of the things that are in the plan to which people have objected actually have to be there or not. If they have to be there, then it doesn't matter if you don't like them or I don't like them, they have to be there. So let's get a legal opinion about whether they have to be there. And we can do that between now and our next meeting. We'll have some clarity on that. And maybe we'll have a few other ideas that will surface in the meantime, apart from separating the appendix, which seems like another thing that we would do for whatever we come forward with. And so I guess my suggestion is we get legal advice, we come back next month, and we see if we can come to consensus on something going forward. But I would like to have Director Fitzgibbons weigh in.
I think staff would like to, there are two things. One, I would just like to take a moment, and I probably should have done this during my introduction, to show that the ultimate plan for the city is the same plan that we currently have. Right, so this is, whoa, again, oh my goodness. Seriously, come on, mouse. Okay, so, never does that for Jeff. So, all the yellow is residential. The single family scale housing that we see now. All the purple is this is the border, and the purple is sort of that mid-rise that exists already. This is the apartment complex on the western side of the city, and this is the Shell station and the jewelry store. So this is our actual zoning map, and this has not changed. This is the zoning map that we still have. We haven't talked about, we've introduced changes to this, but we are not proposing any changes to this. So this is still all 4, R1, this is still R24, this is all the same. This map very much it just shows that the city's ultimate vision for scale and density hasn't changed. And I just want to show that because I do want people to take, despite all the requirements for RDI and housing analyses and whatnot, this is still very much the same. That said, I would like to take this discussion that we've had and try to respond to it between, one, reaching out to the city attorney. I can't just ask the city attorney, is this required? Because he's going to say yes. I've asked Curtis that question, so he's very much going to say yes, it's required. So working between the city attorney and our contacts at Commerce, I'd like to try to rearrange the plan so that the meat and potatoes of the plan, the seven elements that we have, are very clear on the picture, and then all the background data, all the RDI studies, all of that comes either to an appendix or a separate document. I will find out from Curtis if having it as a separate document, can it be adopted as through reference? Does it need to be also adopted as an official document of the city? And it may need to be, but at least all of that background data would be separate. Does that sound fair?
Commissioner Van Hatta.
Just one thought I wanted to throw out there. What I heard tonight was diversity, equity, and inclusion policies are being questioned. AMI, income, you know, do you have to provide affordable housing? Anything to do with sort of income-related things are being questioned. And I get it, you know, like, we're a well-to-do city, so why do we need to plan for things that will never happen? I think if we could maybe go through all the policies, pull those two groups out, just, and roads, but those two things, like, these are all the DEI things, these are all the AMI-related income things. Run those by the lawyer, King County, whoever, and try to, like, do we actually need a plan for low-income housing? Do we have to do it? Because those are the two big things I heard tonight. Versus taking every policy in the plan and, you know, I think those are the two big buckets I heard, so. I don't know the best way to do it, but if we could maybe put them on two spreadsheets, tackle them somehow.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes, I want to say Paul is a very good listener. I think that two things are the kind of a common theme we heard. And I think it's good if we narrow down those for lawyer. I will just also ask one more question to the attorney, really is, A, is it required? B, really is, what's the consequence if we don't comply? I think I heard we will not get a grant. I think I heard transportation grant. What exactly are we talking about? Like $10,000 or
Hundreds.
$1 million, you know?
It's anything. And I should also mention that they can withhold our taxes. And this is an email that I sent out to the group when we asked this question a year ago. And it's been asked and it has been answered. I'm happy to resend it. I'm happy to make it a public document. Well, I can't as privileged information. But basically, they can also take, they can withhold taxes. So the state can, if the GMA board requires it. So I think there are real consequences for not complying. How many cities have been, maybe the question is, how many cities get in trouble for not complying? Maybe that's the question.
Yeah, sorry, I mean, also just like they also said that they're not going to bring us to the GMA hearing board, right? County is not going to sue us, they're not going to bring us. So, I mean, all kind of, I guess, what I'm trying to say is, seems like there's always new things coming up. Like, at the beginning of the meeting, you also told us the latest from the Department of Commerce. Now it's like 2 ADUs on 1 unit. I mean, all those things, I just kind of like, yeah, the lawyer gave us some feedback, 6-7 months ago, something, but now things also are changing, and probably I want to.
That statute hasn't changed on the consequences, though.
Mm-hmm.
I will talk to the city manager too about kind of a legal review on this, but I mean, we do have to talk. I mean, I read the code. We do have to talk to all these things. I think the question is, and plus we were told that we had to provide more than we have, right, on the AMI issue. And even though not all of Newcastle, a lot of Newcastle is affluent, not all of Newcastle is, and there are people that we have to plan for. And that's the point, is that we have to include all of these people in our considerations, all levels. So I would like to do our best to move this, and I know this is not my decision, but I would also like to be part of trying to move this forward as best we can. And I can tell you from reading the statute that we have to talk to these different levels of income. We just have to.
Commissioner Trutman, then Blocker, then Vanetta.
Thank you, Chair Gadzik. I've got to say that once I heard you say that there's probably no consensus to move this forward, you've settled my itchiness down quite a bit. I do have a question for Director Fitzgibbons. I'm kind of genetically predisposed to question authority. And you say that, if you ask Attorney Chambers whether this is required, he's just going to say it's required. Well, then it seems like a waste of time to ask him that. Do we have an option to ask for a second opinion? And I'm not just, again, I'm not knocking our attorney, but if we know the predetermined outcome, as you mentioned, why are we going to just go through the motions? My whole problem with a lot of this, what's required and whatnot, is a function of definition of terms, because what one person defines what term might not be the same as another, and I guess it's the legal definition that's what's really going to be what makes it fly or not. And I mean, if we've got to abide by it, just because I question authority doesn't mean that I won't obey it. If it's the law, we got to do it. But I want to make sure that we've made sure that we absolutely have to do it by everybody's definitions for the benefit of everybody. So if we can get clear definitions of what we're supposed to be abiding by, and clear definitions of, is this suggested, is it a good idea, or is it a wish that this is a pipe dream, or do we absolutely have to step in line to do it? And to this point, I'm trying to catch up. I'm behind the eight ball, and so indulge me on that. But like I say, the thing that struck me is, well, why would I go to an attorney if I already know what he's going to say? So if there's an option to get a different opinion, could that be considered?
And I'm sorry, I should say, if I take him the requirements and say, is this required, he will say yes, right? Like, do I really have to talk to AMI? He's going to, yes, you do. So I think the question we're really getting at is the extent. And so some of that's going to come from the city attorney, and some of that's going to come from Commerce, and some of that's going to come from PSRC, and maybe a little bit from the county.
Commissioner Blocker?
And is it also possible, when you're talking with those people, to get a common sense kind of response from them, hopefully, about Newcastle really isn't a low-income kind of an area? And so, yes, we're supposed to plan for accommodation of this. If some philanthropic developer wants to come in and build emergency housing because he just wants to do it, do we have to do that? Or is there a level at which we can just say, nobody's ever going to come in here and do that?
Sure, yeah, and we've, King County mentioned that they've heard that a lot, and that it's the whole region's responsibility to do their share. That is the response, and that's why.
Well, it's not us to do it. You've pointed that out. It's not ours to do. It's make the provision that it could be done.
Yes.
And we're trying to say, yeah, it could. It isn't going to happen in a real world.
True. I mean, I don't know how many ADUs are going to be applied for. We've had 5 since I started working here.
Yeah, there'll probably be a lot more of those than there will be emergency housing.
Most likely.
And I kind of, back to the statement I made at one point that I'm from Missouri, was it? Show me, when you ask the attorney, show me where. explain to me with the weaselly language that's in a lot of this? Explain it to me, why, please? Because you know, I don't get it.
I should also say that there are hundreds of pages of guidance written by Commerce on how we're supposed to respond. I would be happy to provide those to anybody who's interested in looking at them.
Commissioner Van Anna?
I don't have much to say. I think you guys said it all down.
Yeah, Commissioner Keck.
Last thought would be, I would just maybe recommend we reach out to our sister cities who are similar in size to us. Woodinville, for instance, is one, and see how they are handling this. I'm sure they are going through the same situation as well, to see, if they're answering in the same way that we are. So that'd probably be helpful.
So we actually worked on their complaint.
Yes, so I had some time experience in working with them on their comprehensive plan process and dealing with the exact same state requirements, and they've been going through it and doing the same policy sort of situations, and they adopted their plan.
Did they include the same information?
They went above, they included it within the narrative of their element for the housing element, rather than as an appendix.
Which city?
Woodinville?
Okay, we've talked about the way to deal with the bulk of the comments that we received this evening about the DEI and those things, the different income groups. One place where we do not have a plan to go forward is with the connected streets. And I have shot all my bullets. I don't have any ideas. So I invite any of you who have a suggestion of how to address that in the plan to offer those suggestions and bring them at our next meeting. Right now, what's in the plan is I guess what would be what in the old draft. We didn't approve the new things which are in the draft that we have a hard copy of. So we're back with what we had one step prior, which still favors connected streets. Okay, let's take a look at the agenda and see where we are. Thank you, yes. Well, let me still take a look at the agenda here. Okay, it is 9:07 and the public hearing on the comprehensive plan is now closed. The public testimony portion is over. So is the time we are going to devote to making a motion. And we have additional public comment. Yep.
What's the outcome?
Earlier in the meeting, you said that there was consensus to table or consensus to push on to the next meeting. Is there going to be a motion to table, or is it just consensus amongst the group that we don't need to move this along, or it's going to come back to the next meeting? Like, what is the resolution of this? Before we move on to the next, which is, I think, more public comment.
Well, I think there was consensus without a motion. I didn't write down the steps, but I don't believe, I think we have consensus on how to move forward. Yeah, Aaron had wrote down the steps, I think, but, I can recap those, but.
Is the commission going to come back so for record-keeping purposes, you all accepted testimony, you all had debate. At the end of this, you don't have to make a motion if it's you guys operating in consensus, which is fine. But are we coming back with this?
Yes.
Okay, so there was consensus to table it until a future meeting?
Yes, until our next meeting. Yes, our agenda has additional public comment for individuals who have not already spoken or wish to comment on a different subject. Well, do we need to stick to that rule? All right, it's my meeting, so we have Rob Clark, Larry Fudge, Nola, and Tom for public comment. Mr. Clark.
What I said earlier when I interrupted you was what I was really going to say, but I just want to thank you all for deliberating. You know, Len is a new member, you know, you accepted him and all that, you got all meshed together there. This is, you know, contentious, and you handled it well, I get it, you still got some more work to do, right? Like Aaron said, the lawyer will say, yes, you got to do it, but I'll still come back to what I argued before. These are vague, subjective terms. So, yes, you got to do it, but what exactly do you got to do, right? What is an initiative that you have to establish? What is a policy you have to make? These are just vague nonsense. That's my huge objection. So I get it, the lawyer's going to say you got to do it because it's written like it's written up there, but that's vague too. It makes no sense. So press hard to get specific examples if you're going to put it in the plan, because otherwise you know, it's not going to go anywhere, really. It just doesn't make any sense. But again, you know, you gals are working hard. I'm really grateful, appreciate it. I do really do appreciate your hard efforts. Thank you.
Mr. Fudge?
Anyway, I don't want to keep beating on this connected and through street issue, but is this mostly because they need fire and emergency services to get through to these streets? Or is it because outside entities want to create more passageways through our neighborhoods in our town and turn Newcastle Drive into Sunset in Renton, basically? Which one is it? Any of you have an answer for that? Yes, Lynn?
It's really not the format for a public
Okay,
comment.
well-
But if you want to stick around afterwards, I'm sure we're happy to answer that.
That's just one thing to consider. If it's just for emergency services, then they can put gates up there that the emergency services can get through without providing access to everybody and their brother from 405 to Coal Creek to move on into the greater Highlands areas. The other thing is the 280Us. Most of our properties, I mean, some will fit them, but most of them, 280Us on a property is going to be pretty stinking crowded. And where are we going to have the parking? We're going to be out on the street where we already park with limited parking. Another thing to consider. So everybody thinks it's a great idea to have these through streets until it's your neighborhood that's impacted. When it's your neighborhood, all of a sudden you're kicking and screaming saying, I don't like the idea. So consider that before you move forward. The legal repercussions of everything that they've talked about tonight, of what the state can do, you know, withhold taxes, withhold funds, sue us, what have you. They come down pretty heavy-handed on us as far as what they say we have to implement. What I'd like to know is the reality of what would happen if we stood up to them and said, you know, we don't agree with these policies, we're not going to implement them, we want clarity, we're putting a moratorium on it for right now, and get an injunction against them. They do it against people all the time. Why can't we do it against them? And is there a coalition of opposing cities? I heard it spoke to that we have Woodinville. I know Woodinville and a few other towns, I think it was Duval, Carnation, a few of these other surrounding communities have really not liked the idea of having this shoved down their throat. So we have one attorney with one opinion in our town. Why can't we get all of them together and create this coalition and have those attorneys look at this as a whole and say, these are the things we don't find correct or ambiguous, as the mayor has spoken about. There's too much ambiguity in some of these statements, and it is not a good way to go ahead and move forward in making decisions when you're going to aggravate half the community. And here's some food for thought. Older homeowners here, we would not be able to purchase our homes again right now, just due to the cost of the community, as you well pointed out. Does this mean we're low-income residents, thereby meeting those requirements of low-income housing? How many of us, the old people who can't afford to buy these houses again? Consider that.
Is Nola still here? Hi, Nola, it's your turn.
Is it on? Thanks. Nola Costin again. The staff has spoken of the number of beds needed in Newcastle. The count is actually exaggerated because you have not counted the many beds filled in many Newcastle homes, housing renters and adult children who cannot afford to live on their own. I concur with Major Clark's recommendations, and to the public that isn't aware, this comp plan with DEI sets Newcastle up for government subsidies to develop multi-unit housing in our single-family home neighborhoods and prioritize filling these units with the homeless and low income. Do you and your neighbors want this kind of change? Also, the federal government is eliminating DEI policies, programs, and staff nationwide. Will Newcastle staff and consultant ensure that Newcastle's comp plan is compliant with federal law? There may be consequences for not complying with federal law, which may supersede state law. Thank you.
Tom Griffin.
It's still me, and I guess you guys are ready to go home, same as I. I only had a couple of things. I heard requirements were, if they're suggested or recommended, they're not really something we have to do. If it says shall, yes, we're going to have to do it. If it says should, no, we don't have to. So that would be my experience on it. My experience on writing a bunch of stuff about racial issues, we don't have any, but if you want to have some racial issues, start making it public and write about it, because that'll get you where you want to go.
Okay, thank you. This will close the public comment period. Planning calendar, our next meeting is the 4th Wednesday of February.
February 26th.
26th.
We have Arch coming, so they will be the first item. This public hearing would be the second.
Okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.